I'm Roman.
I'm Bodana.
We're the Power Couple, and your co-pilots on this crazy ride called life.
You are more powerful than you know.
Well, hello and welcome to the Power Couple podcast. Today we have the privilege of interviewing Isabel Friend. Isabel is the president of the American Water Trust, Hydration Foundation Advisor, Water Innovation Accelerator Advisor, and Isabel has been studying water for 13 years from scientific, spiritual, biological, and ecopolitical perspectives. And since then, she's taught in 7 countries and worked with some of the most brilliant water scientists alive. Isabel is a water ambassador, helping people shift their relationship with the source of life, which is utterly life-changing. Isabel's mission is to create a comprehensive water academy which will span the practical insights of health, hydration, and biology to empowering tactics for watershed, guardianship, and ecological activism, to the esoteric and subtle insights of ancient indigenous water wisdom, to the heady scientific discoveries of cutting-edge water research. Isabel also runs a small water laboratory in Mexico and is the president, as we mentioned, of the American Water Trust. And she is also the founder of the most comprehensive online store for water. And Isabel is also the member of the board Water for Life Global, faculty at the Extreme Wellness Academy, and many, many more modalities and foundations. But just want to welcome Isabel here because I heard her on the Paul Check podcast, Living in 4D. Now it's called Spirit Gym. But when Paul had her on, I had to listen to that podcast like 3 times because there was just so much information there. And, just her calm demeanor was great too. And she'd mentioned a lot of things that I never even knew was possible, about water. We always hear water has memory, and then that's as far as it goes. And we don't even know what that means. So, yeah, thank you so much, Isabel, for being a guest on the Power Couple podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor and a joy to join you guys. As I said, it's my first podcast in a while, so it's fun to get back on here and get to dive into a conversation about, honestly, what I love the most, what is the most endlessly fascinating thing in the world to me. So thanks for giving me a chance to indulge my geekery with your audience for a little bit.
We can't wait to geek out with you because it's a fascinating topic for us both.
Yeah. So, how did you get into the study of water? Maybe if you can, tell people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so it started for me right around 2009. I think that bio is about 3 years old. So it's actually been closer to 16 years than 13 years now. 2009, I was a nutritionist. I was living in New York City, and I was specifically studying nutrigenomics, which is how the food we eat affects our gene expression. And the more wild and non-domesticated our food, the more wild and non-domesticated our gene expression and our experience of life. And it's, closer to our wild progenitors and our indigenous ancestors. And I started to think, wait a sec, but all of the water that we drink, for the most part in the Western world, is completely industrialized and processed and devoid of all of its original constituents and vitality and benefits. And so I thought, well, what if I start wildcrafting all my water? And so I started just going to springs and harvesting my water from wild springs. That's around the time that I found the work of Victor Schauberger, who was a naturalist from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And to this day, he's still my greatest hero of all time. And through his work, I started to realize that water genuinely holds all of the solutions to life's toughest questions, because water is life, and water holds the blueprints and the patterns to solve pretty much every single conundrum that humanity has gotten ourselves into, from, the obvious ones like health, wellness, medicine, because our bodies are entirely water, 70% by volume, 99.9% molecularly speaking, all the way to, climate, ecology, to the less obvious ones like questions of spirituality, our relationship with the quantum field, even free energy. I mean, Victor Schauberger was creating free energy devices at the time based on water way back over 100 years ago. And he predicted so much of the downstream effects that humanity has gotten ourselves into at this point. So when I saw that research and I started doing research on my own and discovering, what modern water science has been on the leading edge of, the things that rarely ever make it out of the research journals, I realized I had to devote my life to this. So that's when the passion started. And then 5 years later, I started teaching about it in 2014, just a few workshops here or there. And I realized that, wow, it's not just me, like everyone really needs this wisdom and this information. And water herself, I think, is creating a worldwide awakening to her power and her potential right now that's more necessary than ever. And so in 2019 is when I founded Water is Life and went full-time teaching, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great. I love that. This struck you, and it, created your passion for life now, and that's amazing, because when when you can do your quote unquote job and suffuse it with something you love, then it's not really a job anymore, and doing so much good for the world. It's wonderful.
It's so fun. I still get to learn new things about water all the time. I mean, I've been studying for 16 years, and that, let me tell you, is nothing in the realm of water. I talk to, scientists and researchers who have been studying water for decades and decades, and they'll be the very first ones to tell you that we know nothing about water. Genuinely, we know nothing about water. What we know is a drop compared to the ocean, because she is the embodiment of the ultimate mystery of life itself.
And I think that's very much reflected in our attitude towards water, right? We take it for granted on a daily basis. At least, North America, I could easily say, water. And how many people, I was one of them too, growing up, didn't like drinking water, no taste to it. Well, and there's probably a reason, because it was probably crap water, from the tap. Yeah, of course you're not going to like it. But, it's just so kind of shoved to the side of, you need to hydrate, and that's about it. And so I can't wait to dive in deeper with you on this.
Well, I don't want to get too deep into conspiracy around that, but there has been a concerted effort since at least the last 100 years, if not more, to quell water scientists and voices of water. Even Schauberger in his day, he said that he would get multiple editions of books, where the earlier editions would say something about the person's discoveries about water, and the later editions of those books that had been removed. And certainly we've seen a lot of water wisdom keepers who are mysteriously suicided over the years, usually when they start getting close to the free energy secrets. And it's with good reason, because when we truly understand water for what she is, it undermines the entire structures upon which we've built civilization in every way. Because, for example, in medicine, if you start centering the primacy of water in all of your health treatments, it starts bringing in questions of life after death. It starts bringing in questions of consciousness. It starts bringing in questions of coherence, where you can no longer simply focus on the macromolecules themselves, but you have to actually recognize and integrate the energies and the structural patterns in the field that affect those macromolecules, with water, of course, being the mediator between the seen and the unseen within our biology, which, that would turn the medical model on its head. If you start recognizing again that water is the mediator between the seen and unseen, and so therefore it, through the hydrogen atoms, has access to incredible, vast amounts of untapped energy, that would undermine our entire hierarchical system of electricity and extraction on the planet. And if you start recognizing that all of the weirding that's happening is through, the effects of HARP on water, and the gradual desertification and just disruption and complete ignorance of hydrological cycles as water is continuously sucked out of landscapes. Of course, they heat up. Well, that would shift the entire model and the rhetoric and the very profitable propaganda that exists around climate narratives. So in every part of life that you look at, there has to be a suppression of water wisdom in order to continue the charade of modern life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much that has been lost, and that's what drives me crazy. Especially with indigenous wisdom. And I remember you saying something about, I think it was you, but that the indigenous people, it wasn't necessarily chaga or some kind of, comfrey or herbs that were the master. They were great healers, but water was considered, if you could just have the proper water, you didn't need to have anything else, right? And again, it's just such a, it's taken for granted, right? That we just think, oh, water. Not that the indigenous people thought that, but what did they know about water that we don't know today?
Absolutely. Water is the panacea. And they recognized that it becomes a liquid vessel of that which it is exposed to. And so that's why water is a primary, often the primary element in Indigenous ceremonies. There's a quote that I love from a Native American elder. He said, "The ceremony's over when the water runs out." Because you need holy water, to really conduct, whether you're talking about a ritual baptism or an exorcism or anything. It's not just indigenous communities, it's in every single major religion as well. And so there's this natural understanding that has been really robbed from humanity, since 542 AD, the Canon of Arles. We don't have to go there necessarily, but like it's interesting how it's such, the relationship with water is fundamental to being human. We have this natural relationship where when we're close to water, we feel more calm, we feel more at peace. There's a phenomenon called the blue mind effect, which is where it creates more of a parasympathetic dominance. The more time you spend around water, the more you look at it, the more you hear its voice. So innately in our biology, we know this. And then the indigenous communities, of course, they spent so much time with wild water, which, as we've kind of touched on, is a completely different entity or a different iteration of water than the water that we usually encounter from the tap or from bottles, where, you could say that water is sort of like a person who's comatose. They're not responsive, they're not reactive, they're not taking in their environment, they're not, you have to awaken that water. I don't call it dead water. It's because it can always be awakened, but it is comatose for sure. Versus the wild water that indigenous people were able to commune with constantly. That's like an Olympic athlete compared to a comatose person. And I think the reason why most people don't have an experience of water as being vibrant and life-giving is because they don't have that much experience with drinking wild waters and spending a significant amount of time in wild waters that do carry the vitality of life itself. They're the body of life itself. And then, that's of course the most obvious is when we drink that water, we become more hydrated. But then there's layers to that as well, which are really where my fascination tends to lead me, which is why and how is that water so vitalizing? Part of that is because water has this unique relationship with light. And I know that you guys are the power couple. You're all about light and energy and power. And so how does water actually contain all of this light? How does it encode all of this energy, all of this information? How is it able to translate that light, energy, and information from, not only the earth, but also the cosmos, the layers of vibration that it's receiving from the stars and the moon. And this is not some woo-woo sort of thing. Like we have countless, studies that can show this, that can prove this. There are so many water researchers and naturalists who say that like water is this point of communication between all of the realms of energy with which we need to be in constant contact, and our biology kind of expects that of us, but we're robbing ourselves of all of those layers of communication by drinking comatose water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the light and water relationship, because it's almost like, when light speeds up, uh, uh, there's a relationship that happens. Well, let's say when light slows down, right? We create mass, right? E equals mc squared. If we when light speeds up, mass gets matter shrinks, things like that. So water itself is like a mediator. So if you speed it up too much, you could destroy it, because it's going to vibrate too quickly. So, and every time I drive on the highway, I see water towers are coated with these antennas, right? Radio frequency antennas, or they're putting radio frequency transmitters on people's water pipes, which are copper, which are going throughout the whole house. And that's vibrating it too quickly, just like that's how a microwave works. It doesn't destroy the water molecule. It vibrates it so aggressively over time that eventually it can be destroyed. But that just shows right there is such a relationship, scientifically proven in everybody's home, between light and water. That's, I mean, so, but on the flip side, so if that's the negative, well, what's the positive, right? The indigenous, they were drinking water from springs. Those being hit by sunlight all the time, all those different frequencies of full spectrum sunlight. And we've forgotten that, right? We put our water bottles in somewhere in a cupboard, or, and not that we want it exposed to light all the time. And maybe that's something we can talk about, but there is that relationship, that charging your water, that's a whole nother thing that, well, we've started to do. But there is that relationship between light and water. And if you've ever seen a full moon, right, what happens to the ocean, right, during a full moon? I mean, we have the magnetic field, of course, but it's that light too that, of course, is going to act on our water. But what I wanted to get into was, when we see the sunrise, and there's this whole thing with our body water, just to understand and explain to people, how do we really hydrate? Because we hear, okay, you're thirsty, drink more water. That's yeah, it's good to drink water, I think, if you're feeling thirsty, but sometimes that can be a little too linear of a logic. So when we see the sunrise, it frees up hydrogen electrons in our body because of the photoelectric effect. Light is striking our surface. It's creating a spark in us that's then basically freeing up all these hydrogen atoms that is in creating water within our body right away. And like you said, the vessel. So how would you tell somebody to what's the best way for somebody to create their own body water, and to really stay hydrated, and it doesn't matter where you are. I know that's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think there's a few different layers to that question. There's, how do we make sure that we stay properly hydrated? And then what are the kind of light and lifestyle practices that ensure that our body is creating and retaining really good high quality water, and is able to, transition that water between all of the different hydrological cycles within us in a healthy way? And so I'm going to start with part 2, and then if we want, we can back up to part 1. So our body, as you said, produces its own water. It produces its own hydrogen, which in my estimation, based on my research, is the spirit of water. Just like we have a body, mind, and spirit, water also, as a living being, has a body, mind, and spirit. And I consider hydrogen to be the spirit of water. And The primary pathway through which your body creates its own water is through the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria, where it takes hydrogen, spins it through these nanomotors that are kind of like wind turbines. And those wind turbines generate energy or ATP. Now, there's kind of this misunderstanding about the nature of ATP, which I'm sure you guys are already aware of, where we tend to think of it as the powerhouse of the cell, this energy macromolecule, but it doesn't technically have any more energy in it than any other macromolecule within the cell. But what it does is it acts as the agent that congeals our intracellular fluid into a very highly ordered, structured, crystalline state from H2O to H3O2, or you can think of it as like the difference between coal and a diamond. They're both just carbon. The only difference between them is the structure of the carbon. And of course, the more structure in our intracellular fluid, the more it's like diamond water inside of us. And it's able to communicate vast amounts of information and retain vast amounts of voltage. So you get that cellular voltage that brings the cells alive, because when we think about being hydrated, it really has very little to do with how much we drink and has everything to do with the state and the quality of the waters inside of us. There are also processes of creating metabolic water within the cells, again, also through the mitochondria, where they generate de novo deuterium-depleted water. And deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, but it has an extra electron. So it's heavier, it's like more thick and viscous, and it doesn't generate as much energy for the cells. So then you get a lower cellular voltage. And because it has this extra neutron in there, it's not able to bond to the other hydrogens in the H2O and the H3O2 within the cell at the same angle. And that angle is important because it determines what kind of symmetry you're going to have in the crystallinity of the expression of the intracellular fluid. So if you have too much deuterium in the cell, you get cellular crowding, you get destructured biowater within there, and then the cellular voltage lowers. That's your prana, that's your mana, that's your chi. I mean, when we're measuring a person's hydration, we use the exact same, the main tool to measure someone's hydration is actually the exact same tool that we would use to measure their voltage, their prana, their mana, their chi. It's called a phase angle test. And you basically pass a little signal through the finger, and it measures how quickly your cell membranes can draw that charge across. So it's a hydroelectric process for water to get in and hydrate the cell, and for used water to get out and detoxify the cell. That's all a hydroelectric process. It's all mediated by electricity. And what conducts electricity in the body? What's the conductor, the capacitor of electricity? It's water. And so your level of electricity in the body is exactly commensurate always with your level of hydration. I don't mean how much water you drink, that's just irrigation, but your level of actual hydration. And again, this is based on so many different factors. Like you were saying, what quality light are you getting? There's a researcher that I really respect and admire named Dolph Zantiga. And he has said that light is just a bundle of frequencies that has to be brought in by the right water. In other words, the right kind of water. So different types of water, based on its level of coherence, they have different abilities to translate light into biological frequencies. And make no mistake, light takes no effect on anything, on any ecosystem, on any biological being, on anything except through the phase changes of water. Whether we're talking about photosynthesis or our circadian rhythms or whatever it is, the only way that light is translated into biological information, frequencies, and balance and put to use is through water in our bodies. So we want to make sure that we're really optimizing for that metabolic water production and for our mitochondria to have the right kind of hydrogen, which, like we said, deuterium, of course, is heavy hydrogen. Regular hydrogen, though, is called protium. So they're like brother and sister, or like, you know, deuterium's like the evil twin, and then protium just has the one proton. So it's able to generate a lot of energy for the cell in that ATP production process.
So what is the number, the common person, right? Or anybody listening to this podcast who's not common, they're usually, you know, stepping up their game for their health. But what do we do, right? How do we start building that structured water, if that's a good term, or that hydration within our body? Because, you know, it's kind of like the irrigation. I love that. That just kind of clicked for me, that, you know, you can have a massive pool, a big swamp that's, you know, you can pull from, and there's a lot of irrigation there, but, you know, the hydration itself is a different story. That's kind of like that fast moving river or stream that may not have as much quote unquote massive water, but it has more energy. So how do we start building that energy and electrifying ourselves in a good way with that water? If I just, you know, I wake up in the morning, now what do I do? Right. Kind of thing.
So when we're talking about the metabolic water production, one of the most important things that we can look at is our diet. And when we're talking about deuterium depletion, a lot of it is diet and a lot of it is lifestyle. So just on the dietary side of things, when you want to produce more metabolic water, if you eat fats, high quality, really healthy fats, ghee, for example, creates a lot of H3O2, according to Dr. Gerald Pollack's work. But healthy fats in general, for every 100 grams of fat that you eat, your body produces 110 grams of metabolic water. Whereas for every 100 grams of protein that you eat, your body produces, I think, around 90 to 100 grams of metabolic water. And for every 100 grams of carbs that you eat, it's more like 70 to 80 grams of metabolic water. So getting good high quality fats in the diet is a great idea. That's, I think, why the ketogenic diet, at least in the short term, works so well for most people. I definitely don't fall into any specific dietary dogma, but there's a lot that can be done dietarily to help with hydration for sure. And then, you know, of course, as you mentioned, you want to get a sunlight in your eyes right away as soon as possible. You want to watch that sunrise if you can, because it's programming the water with the frequencies that it needs to balance your circadian rhythms for the day. Ideally, if you can get your feet on the soil as well, especially if you can do that while you're sun gazing in the morning, that's really ideal because you get the Schumann resonance, all those extra negative ions. My personal favorite is to put my legs in the water and do a bit of kniping therapy in the morning while I'm sun gazing. So it's really just, I feel it generating a lot of energy in my body. Sebastian Kneipp was a German or Austrian innovator, also during the early 1900s, I believe, who developed forms of hydrotherapy where, you know, it's very simple things that you wouldn't expect to have a big difference. Like, for example, walking knee deep in freezing cold water. And that, you know, has a certain effects versus using, you know, very hot water on certain parts of the back, just different aspects of hydrotherapy. He was able to cure a number of people of amazing, just incredible cure rates. And so there were multiple doctors from Europe who came and studied with him to find out what he was doing. So I don't fully practice knifing, but I like to invoke a little bit of what he was doing, at least during my sun gazing practice. So that would be a great way to start the day. Also, you know, anytime you want to go into parasympathetic dominance, just putting your face in a little bit of ice water is a really great way to just kind of soothe the nervous system. And of course, when your nervous system is soothed and you have kind of that autonomic balance going on, then your body goes into more of the mode of rest and repair and digest. And part of that, of course, is creating more metabolic water and to have more on board, versus when you're in a state of dehydration or stress, your body is going to produce more histamines that act as these kind of emergency water management regulators that actually draw water away from the parts of the body where they're where you might need them, but your body in that moment of thinking that it's an emergency mode, it might think, okay, well, we're going to draw water only to the most necessary survival parts of the body. And so as the other areas that it doesn't deem to be necessary for survival in those moments, as those other areas gradually experience more and more consistent drought over time, then there can be, instances of acidification, the lowering of the pH, or inflammation, which of course, inflammatio, it comes from inflammatio in Latin, which just means on fire. It just means there's not enough water there, right? This heating that takes place in those areas. You can prevent all of that. Chronic pain is a sign of localized drought in an area. The fascia dries out in those areas, and then it can't deliver that, hydration to the cells in those areas of the body. So staying in autonomic nervous system balance consistently is a really, really important part of staying well hydrated overall. And so in terms of, I'm trying to think, like, walking through the day, what would you do? So obviously a morning like face bath in ice water is a really great way. Kniping is a great way. And then throughout the day as well, it's really important to recognize that even though drinking water starts the hydration process, it's really movement and protecting ourselves from EMF or getting enough grounding on the earth that complete the hydration process. And I would say if there are any two factors that are the two most overlooked aspects of hydration, it would be these two steps, because we think, oh, I'm just drinking water, so therefore I'm hydrating. But if that water can't get delivered to your cells effectively, then you're not really effectively hydrating. And there are a couple main factors that determine how well it's able to get there. One is, again, movement, because your fascia is this irrigation network, and it delivers these little droplets of water along this beautiful crystalline gel-like web that is cohesively interconnected all throughout the entire body. And the fascia itself is 80% water, 20% protein. It's very structured water. And so the fascia, unlike the circulatory system, only moves when we move. So it doesn't have a pump to get that water to everywhere that it needs to go in the system. It's a hydraulic network. Hydraulic means movement by water. So the lymph and the fascia are these two incredible hydraulic networks. One of them delivers healthy, hydrating water to the cells, and the other carries away used water and detoxifies it from the cells, right? They're both so important to optimize when we're talking about the quality of our biowater and our level of hydration. And both of them, again, only move when we move. Neither of them have a pump. So when we're sitting still and stagnant throughout the day, that's actually the most dehydrating thing we can do. Ironically, it's not what you would expect necessarily, but as you're sitting still, your body is drying out. And that's because our bodies mirror the Earth's hydrology exactly. And water in nature is always moving, always in a state of flux, always in a state of flow. Stagnation is antithetical to the nature of water, even in what would appear to be a still, serene lake. There are subtle micro movements of flows within the water under the surface. There are still, even in a glacier that appears to be completely still, there are still rivulets of melting water. There's still evaporation from the surface. There's still, a subtle flotation that's happening. Water is always in a state of homeodynamics, and our bodies should be as well. And so when we move, that water gets to flow, but it's not the same kind of movement necessarily that you would do if you're doing it for cardiovascular health or for strength. The movements that we do for our fascia and our lymphatic flow are actually much simpler and easier and low stress. And so all throughout the day, for example, if you're sitting at a desk all day, you're dehydrating yourself normally, but if you can incorporate these few specific practices, it's going to help a lot. So a small movement to us is a really big movement to ourselves, which means that even if you just like make little movements of certain parts of your body, it's about moving as many parts of your body as you can in as many novel ways as possible Even if that just means like, oh, have I moved my right shoulder diagonally in a while? Probably not. Have I moved my left pinky toe in circles in a while? Probably not. Let me see if I can actually stretch my scalp. Can I actually see if I can activate those muscles to stretch my scalp on top of my cranium? And getting creative with it. There are things that you can do while you're sitting at your desk and working, but they're going to get that flow moving, because we don't want any small part of our body to become stagnant, to dry out, to get dehydrated, because again, that's where acidity and inflammation start to take root. And then for the flow of lymphatic fluid, which is the other aspect of movement and hydration, you can do some simple lymphatic massages a couple times a day. They take just a couple minutes. You can do it while you're sitting there for the most part, or you can do one like 5 to 10 minute practice as part of your morning or your evening routine. But it's really great to get to just stimulate the lymph nodes. And also, anytime you move any of your major joints in the body, then you're stimulating the flow of lymph, because our bodies are so brilliant to have concentrated all of our major lymph nodes in our joints, which are the things that move the most. So the more you move them, the more it flows. And then the other aspect of intracellular hydration that is often really overlooked is something that I know you guys in particular are really experts in, which is EMF exposure. And when we're in the presence of non-native electromagnetic fields, no matter how high quality the water that you're drinking, your body cannot properly absorb it, because again, it's a hydroelectric flow. It's an electromagnetic process of water moving in and out of the cells. It's all about the charge at the cell membrane. Incidentally, the cell membrane is made almost entirely of fats. It's different lipid layers, which is another reason why, besides creating more metabolic water, eating high quality fats also creates higher quality cell membranes that channel water in and out more effectively. So the fats are a big part of hydration, almost even more so than drinking water, especially if you're drinking, swag bottled water. You'd be better off to eat an avocado. But the EMFs, because your biowater can, not always, but can, and usually in most cases, it does act sort of like a tuning fork that will start to resonate in line with the most dominant frequency in its environment. And if that is something like 5G or Wi-Fi routers, then your gap junctions can start to resonate at the wrong frequency. Your cell membranes can start to resonate at the wrong frequency. And if they're not at that specific vibration that draws the water across, then you just won't be able to absorb water very well. So I would say the primary reason, not just I would say, I've looked at the research, and this is what it says, the primary reason why EMFs are detrimental to our biology is because of their interactions with our biowater and the way that they inhibit the biowater from actually entering and exiting the cell. They create this artificial stagnation, and they alter the voltage of the cell. And the voltage is the frequency. It's the identity of the cell. So if the cell is at a different frequency, it doesn't know who it is anymore. It doesn't know if it's a spleen cell or, an adrenal gland cell. It's resonating with something that's completely unnatural to it. And so it's not able to behave in the ways that it should. And the cell, as we know, is 70% water by volume. But if you look at the molecular count, it's 99.9% water molecules that make up every cell in the body. So molecularly speaking, if we don't center the primacy of water's health, and mostly what makes water healthy is the frequencies that it's exposed to, which determine the level of coherence it's able to have, and its its mineral composition, its deuterium isotope composition, and those kinds of things, then we're really putting ourselves at a disadvantage, because no amount of supplementation or healthy diet will be able to have as much of an impact as it could, because it's actually that osmotic flow of water in and out of the cells that even determines how much of our nutrients we can absorb in the first place. You can be, spending $1,000 at Whole Foods every month. But if you're not well hydrated, your body won't be able to absorb those nutrients into the cells because you don't have that osmotic flow of water pulling it all in. So having that EMF mitigation strategy is really key. And when I work one-on-one with clients, it's one of the primary things that we look at for sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and that was one of the reasons too I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I remember when you were on Paul Check's show, you had mentioned some research that when water is given a break, it then, we always hear water has memory. So what does that mean? Well, when water has some respite and is exposed to an electromagnetic field, then it gets a little break, then it's exposed again. Well, apparently, from what I remember you saying, is that water then builds a certain resilience that then it has more of an added strength against these fields. So I found that fascinating because, all we really need to do is rest, but, we need to turn these frequencies off. And, and that's why we always say power on with light, power off at night. You power off these things you don't need, so you get the rest you need. And it's so basic, right? Like people need to be reminded all the time. So I don't know if you can just kind of mention that research really quick.
Yeah, for sure. So there was one of my water mentors, may he rest in peace. He was a dear friend and absolutely brilliant water scientist. He was an electrical engineer and a nuclear engineer, and so he was able to bring a certain level of understanding to water that no one else in this space really has. And he was doing some research on water, per usual, and they did this one experiment where I don't recommend this. They shot water all the way through with very incoherent, disharmonious, just deleterious, harmful, damaging frequencies at as high of a voltage for as long of a time as they could. And water fought back. It was one of the many ways that he not discovered for the first time, but that he encountered personally the ways in which water is sentient. That water, I mean, many times in the lab, water will show up to have a personality, a sense of humor, but she, make no mistake, is the queen of this planet. She rules all biological systems on this planet. And hydrological and climatological and everything. So she's powerful as well. You don't want to mess with water. And they were messing with water in the lab. And so she ended up shooting this massive pulse of energy and electricity back out through the wires, through the machinery, through the equipment, nearly fried everything in their lab.
Wow.
And when he would talk to other scientists about that, they'd be like, no, that's not possible. Water can't do that. That's blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Modern science is thousands of years behind the actual recognition of what water is capable of, because she breaks so many laws of physics. There are 63, at least, water anomalies, ways in which it behaves unlike how any other substance would behave. And she would have to, because she's the vehicle of life itself. So she would have to break every other law to make life possible and to make life, sustainable and resilient, right? So she's friggin' resilient herself. So then they were like, okay, well, how can we make water not make water, but how can we allow water the time to adapt to these frequencies? If for whatever reason we have to expose water to these frequencies, how do we allow her to adapt to that? And that's when he started turning to the work of Victor Schauberger, who spoke of water ennoblement. And the process of water ennoblement is similar to, but unlike most of the water enlivening practices that the whole water alchemy movement and hydration movement currently does. Because water ennoblement really incorporates its principle of the fact that water needs to rest, that polarity exists everywhere in this 3D world, and that just like we have day and night, we have activity and rest, we have the yin and the yang, water needs that balance for her greatest expression. So, a lot of the water alchemy tools that you'll see on the market today, they're all about just charge the water, activate the water, energize the water, structure the water, vortex the water. That's all a lot of active movement, and that's great. It absolutely makes the water so much more bioavailable. They're actually very important steps. But there are very few, I know of maybe only one, maybe two products on the market that actually genuinely ennoble water by giving it that time to rest. And part of that is not only a time to be still, but to be still in a way that it's charging with information, in the same way that deep underground in an aquifer, water is silent and water is dark and water is shielded from any frequencies. That's not true at all. Any non-native frequencies. She's protected in a chamber of Schumann resonance frequencies, of geomagnetism. They've done studies to show that even deep underground in a Faraday cage bunker, water still responds to all of the movements of the cosmos. But in these aquifers, water is in this safe womb-like space where she's only exposed to natural frequencies. And that's an important part of the life cycle. Just like gestation in a womb in the darkness is an important part of our life cycle, just like, retreating away from wakefulness in the dark of the night is such an important part of our vitality. Water needs that too. And so he ended up devising an experiment where they would give the water time to rest in between its exposures to these harmful frequencies. And it was always offbeat a little bit, like, water responds better to the egg than to the sphere, right? We're talking about codes of 13, not codes of 12. Like, he would, instead of every 24 hours, he would do every 25 hours or every 23 hours or something along those lines, where even if it was just for an hour or two, he would give the water time to rest. And what it did during that time was integrate those frequencies that it had been exposed to, learn from them, and then in a way that still it would be unbelievable to most scientists, when he turned the frequency back on, what water sent back, because water is the most primal, original reflector, right? So it's always reflecting and mirroring back. It will bounce a signal back. What it was reflecting back was not that same signal that it was being sent. It was able to do complex mathematical equations during its restful period to be able to send back a signal that was actually refined by the phi ratio. So it was upgraded. It was able to create a phi ratio harmonic that made that original deleterious signal, that made it beneficial, that made it a harmonious and life supporting. And this is what water does. This is what life does. It creates harmony. It creates vivacity. It overcomes obstacles. It defies all odds. And it uses sacred geometry and the principles of nature and life to do so. In fact, you could say that it's a principle of water that is encoded into nature, which is why we see sacred geometry and phi ratios everywhere in nature, because nature runs on water. And this is water's code. This is water's frequency. Water's signal is the phi ratio. And she evolves things in that way. And that's the reason why we have evolution. That's the reason why we have, life at all that's able to sustain itself despite everything that we throw at it, is because we can throw anything at water and she will, if given the opportunity, intelligently respond, adapt, and heal that. And that's another reason why water is the primary healer that we can possibly turn to, because if we optimize the water within our bodies, whatever toxicity or crap we throw at our bodies, she will be able to intelligently respond and adapt to it if she's coherent, deuterium depleted, oceanic mineral ratios, all of those different aspects of internal hydration that we can go into if you want. But we see it kind of both ways, that if you're not very well hydrated, you will respond poorly to EMFs and they will be dehydrating to you. And then it's like a vicious cycle. But if you're very well hydrated, you can be around EMFs all the time and not respond quite as negatively because you have such a strong level of coherence in your bio water that it's not going to, that coherence acts as a buffer. And I can bring up some quotes from various doctors and researchers around that if you'd like. And I think I actually have them right here. I just posted it yesterday. So there's like there's this back and forth of like, yes, EMFs are dehydrating, but also being hydrated is the best buffer against EMFs. So taking that time to rest without EMF exposure at night is really ideal because it gives you the resilience to be able to be very well buffered against any toxins, you know, be they physical or energetic and vibrational that might enter your field after that.
Wow. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question on, because that was just mind-blowing listening to
like,
the
man,
force
water.
of power that water has. It's just incredible. And of course, how healing. And I'm just thinking, you know, for the average person who may not have access to a spring or be able to wildcraft their water, they may only have tap water. The intention of taking that water into your body, what you energetically are putting towards that water, can that have an impact?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there were these Russian researchers that studied the effect of various influences on water. And they showed that even though water is exquisitely perceptive and responsive to even the most minute fluctuations in the field, be they auditory stimuli or visual stimuli or electromagnetic or whatever it is, water is always responding to its environment with a way greater radius than we might think that it might be sensitive to, like a way greater radius. It's insane. But the thing that it responds to the most of anything else is human emotion. And that's likely because we are bodies of water and our emotions are creating certain vibratory fields within our biowater. And there's this principle of epitaxy or transference that if you have something that is highly crystalline, highly coherent, highly symmetrical, it will bring anything incoherent in the field to a greater level of coherence. That's why some people put crystals in their water. I mean, side note, I don't think that's nearly as effective as people think it is, and we can go into the research behind that. But it does, it does help structured water to keep its structure. It does help donate a little bit of information, a little bit of structure. You would have to have like a very strong crystal. Anyway, but your body is crystal, like we said before. It's the difference between coal or a diamond, and our bio water is highly structured. That's why we're able to be alive. Only structured water actually facilitates and channels life force energy. So we are these living liquid crystals. And we have these biofields of resonant energy, and their water around us will respond to that, especially if we channel that energy with intention. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't filter your water. I'm not saying that it will neutralize toxins in the water. I'm not saying that it's enough to make your water perfect unless you are, you know, a very practiced, you know, shaman, meditator, monk, nun, and for the last 40 years of your life, you've been cultivating a way of making your energy, prayer, and intention sharp like a laser to structure that water. If not, then it's not enough on its own. And it's good to have other practices, but God knows it's a great first step, and water loves and appreciates that so much. And water does become, as we said before, the vessel of whatever frequencies it's been exposed to. So if you genuinely love your water with your heart, you know, even if you just hold a glass of water, you can actually measure your heartbeat in that water. If you put an oscilloscope in that water, you can measure your heartbeat in that water. We're always in relationship to water all the time. Now, if you hold that water to your chest and you genuinely have a moment of authentic, non-distracted, heart, brain coherent, left, right mind coherent connection with that water, that is the best thing that you can do for it. But I don't think it's the only thing you should do for it. I teach a 6-step process of how to bring your water back to its highest quality state. I think of there as being like 3 main kinds of drinking water. There's a water that most people drink, which counterintuitively is actually actively dehydrating them. This would be things like tap water, distilled water, reverse osmosis water, vast majority of bottled waters. They actually take more energy from the body than they give back to the body in hydroelectricity, because it takes energy for the body to convert them into structured H3O2. They're also, especially in the cases of reverse osmosis and distilled water, they're aggressive solvents. So they leach minerals from the body. They're chaotic. You've got the hydrogen bonds forming and breaking apart billions of times per second. There's no coherence. And, it's been linked to things like distilled water, especially, has been linked to things like diuresis and heart disease. And then when you're talking about tap water and all of the dehydrating factors in the tap water, and how through proximal effects, they create all of these downstream health issues. And then, of course, you've got the chlorine, which is just creating a mini genocide in your microbiome. And microbiome health is another big part of hydration, in the same way that the health of the fish and the reef and all of that is so important to the health of the ocean. Like, plus it's mineral. Anyway, you've got dehydrating water on the one hand.
Sorry, Isabel, can I just ask on that
Yeah.
the thing with distilled water? What if you add like Himalayan salt and minerals to that distilled water? Does that make a difference?
It's a good start. I'm going to go over all 6
Oh, okay.
steps,
All right.
and
All
that's
right.
part of one of the steps.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good start. And there's some things to be aware of in terms of the type of salt that you're using. There's almost no salts on the market now that don't have some heavy metals within them. But it's a really great direction to turn, for sure. It's better than just plain distillation. So there's the water that dehydrates. There's the water that your body expects of you at a minimum, which would be spring water. And that's water that hydrates, right? That's water that has vivacity, vitality, good mineral ratio, good exposure to light frequencies. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors were preferentially choosing spring water above anything and everything else. So that's the minimum. That's water that will hydrate you. But then there's another type of water. That's the water that actively imparts life. And we see this at certain springs around the world. Springs like Bernadette's Grotto in Lourdes, France, where countless pilgrims per year will make a pilgrimage just to drink this water. And there have been hundreds and hundreds, literally hundreds of cases at this point of people drinking that water and being cured of their ailments. Similar in Nadana, India, Henryotsoi, Japan. What was the place? Tlacote, Mexico. Actually, Magic Johnson was cured of his AIDS by drinking that water at the time that spring was open. Hundreds and hundreds of pilgrims per day were visiting it. So there are these certain springs around the world that all throughout human history have been recognized as healing springs, as miracle springs. Even in the Bible, there was a spring where people would wait around, and they said, when the hand of God would move over the spring, then all of the invalids would come and drink of that water, and the first person to drink of that water after the hand of God had moved over it would be healed. Like, it's all throughout history we see these, and only recently have we been able to test these waters and see what are their unique capacities, and can we mimic them in the water that we drink. And as it turns out, we can, and there are certain things that they all have in common. And there are a lot of methods and practices that we can use to bring our water as close as possible to those miracle healing springs, which is kind of where the majority of my excitement and research is going, because there are certain types of water on the market and types of water that we can create at home. But they're just water, no additive. And the rates of people healing or experiencing alleviation from their symptoms just by drinking these waters is beautiful. So the 6 steps that I teach in my Navigating the Waters course and that I walk through with private clients, and I'll give you a glimpse of them now, at least enough to like take some action on them today, is how do we at minimum bring our water back to spring quality so that it goes from dehydrating to at least hydrating. And that would be obviously forage if you can. Go to findaspring.com, find your local spring, get local spring water if you can. If you can't, for whatever reason, the next step is to filter. And obviously, I don't maybe have to explain that one much. We go into it really in depth in the course, but filtration, of course, is key. You want your water to be clean, but that's not enough. For filtration to be enough, that would be like saying, I showered today and therefore I'm healthy. But hydration or hygiene, being clean, is only one very small aspect of health. So we want to go a little bit farther than just the hygiene of cleaning the water of particulates. And so the next step is to structure the water, and that's creating the symmetry, the coherence of the molecular bonding and the hydrogen molecules really having that strength of coherence together where they can pass information between one another. That's like the difference between drinking coal water versus drinking diamond water. Again, it's just carbon either way, but coal is unstructured and chaotic, and a diamond is highly structured and symmetrical. So we want our water to reflect that as well. And even though it's a clear liquid, either way, when you drink it over time, you'll develop a little bit more of a palate and a taste for it. There is a bit of a difference in the flavor and the viscosity and the overall mouth feel to structured versus unstructured water. And then the next step is to balance your water. And that's just making sure that the water is eating and breathing well. Just like we need to eat and breathe, water also needs to eat and breathe to be healthy. And so the eating part would be like what you mentioned, like making sure that it's partaking of the earth element, it's partaking of the right minerals and electrolytes that it needs, and adding a bit of salt can be great. In fact, Dr. Fredo Batmagelic, one of my favorite water researchers, he was able to create incredible healing results with people just by implementing certain levels, certain ratios of remineralization with salt alone. So that's huge, especially if you can get a really good high quality salt. Very important that is clean. For example, I love Baja Gold salt. It's one of my favorites. There's one that came across my desk recently that I need to look into more. I can email it to you later if you want to put it in the show notes, but it's one of the only ones on the market that's been tested to have no heavy metals in it. That was exciting. But then I also really love using things like fulvic and humic for remineralization. Instead, I love beam minerals. Beam minerals is my absolute favorite, and Quinton marine plasma, another favorite electrolyte. I could go just deep into the rabbit holes on those, but for the sake of time, we won't right now, but those are really great options. There's also a specific type of volcanic ash that comes up from under the sea floor that is, they say that it is actually the source of all minerals, that all minerals come originally from this particular process in the seabed, and that when you put this, and I've seen it happen for sure, where not only does it electrolyze the water, but it also cleans the water. So if you have no access to another type of filtration, you can hit 2 steps in one if you get this particular type. And then there's forage, filter, structure, balance. So making sure water is eating properly, the right electrolyte ratios is part of balance, and then making sure it's breathing properly is the other aspect of the balance step, which is making sure that the water is well aerated. So just like we need to breathe, water also needs to breathe. Just like we breathe more when we move more, water also breathes more when she moves more. She ends up dissolving gases like oxygen and carbonic acid, and that's why I have these 3 vortexes back here that are vortexing the water, allowing her to breathe. You're getting those nano bubbles. The nano bubbles increase the surface area of the water. Then it's able to take in more information. And increased surface area also leads to increased structurization. So it both structures and aerates the water. And then I also really love specifically infusing water intentionally with dissolved gases as well through hyperoxygenation or through molecular hydrogen infusion. Depending, I'm very, very picky about hydrogen. There's so many swag hydrogen things on the market that actually do more harm than good. So I always have to add the caveat whenever I say add hydrogen to your water, because I'm not saying Kangen machines. Absolutely not. I'm not saying, electrolyze your water or use like this cheap crap from China that just leaches heavy metals into your water. Like, no, that destroys the structure. It's a whole another rabbit hole. But it's diffusing hydrogen, when it's done properly, is one of the most, if not the most healing, medicinal, beneficial thing that you can do for your water, because you get that proteum, right? That then, like we talked about before, generates the ATP and then creates the cellular energy, boosts the cellular voltage, all this kind of thing. So you have forage, filter, structure, energize. And then the last step, which we've already gone over and the rest of the chat together today, is embody. And that's, what are you doing to make sure that your body can actually absorb and retain and put to use that good water. So those are the 6 steps for hydration overall, from the external drinking waters to the internal waters of our bodies, and how to take any kind of swag water you might be drinking and bring it at minimum at least back to spring quality state where it's more bioavailable, and we'll be able to translate. Wait, did we cover the energize step? Did I skip over energize? I think I did.
Well, yeah, hydrogen. That was the last thing
Yeah,
you
that
said.
was part of the balance step. Okay,
Oh,
sorry
yeah.
about that. Energize is very simple, actually. It's just making sure that your water is exposed to good high quality frequencies. So making sure that your water is exposed to, for example, moonlight or starlight or the Schumann resonance or the full spectrum light frequencies. There's a product that I really love that actually gives your water the full spectrum of the entire light frequencies, because the water within this particular wand is exposed to every cycle of the sun over an entire year, every cycle of the moon over an entire year. It gets the full balance of light energy that's then infused into your water, and you can measure the photonic difference in the water. And they've been doing double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials of people drinking this water, and they've been, pouring this water on plants and agricultural uses, and the results are really, really beautiful and astounding. So getting good light energy into your water. Good sound energy. There's another thing that I use where you can program your water specifically with unique frequencies of whatever supplement you might want to be taking, whatever endogenous, molecule or hormone you might want to upregulate or downregulate. I like to do oxytocin in my water every morning before a podcast. I like to do like alpha brainwave frequencies and some nootropics and lion's mane in there to just help my, synapses fire the way that I want them to. So you can program your water with any frequency that you want. I think for your daily drinking water, it's best to have the full spectrum. And then for like acute cases, sometimes very specific frequencies, but that's the energized step. So if we're mimicking nature, if we're mimicking spring water, it would mostly be the Schumann resonance and light frequencies.
Can I just ask with, because I've also heard that if you leave, say, like a growler or a glass container in sunlight for too long, that will degrade the water, right? So you want like a certain balance there too, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Schauberger said, sunlight makes water lazy and moonlight makes water active. And we can, like you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast, you can see the difference of the tides in the moonlight, and you can measure the difference in the carrying capacity of water in the moonlight versus the sunlight. Sunlight kind of slows water down. It's important to get light frequencies in your water for sure. But my favorite way is to do that, to get sunlight in so that you're not just baking your water. Because also when water warms, the molecules spread apart. So you can think of it as like steam. Obviously, the molecules are very far apart. And then with ice, the molecules are very close together. So the more the water warms up, the more the molecules spread apart. And so I don't like leaving my water out in direct sunlight for too long. Obviously, for a few minutes is totally fine. And the water responds instantaneously to every signal in its environment. So a few minutes is enough to get some light codes, especially if you put it in like a cobalt blue glass or a Myron glass bottle. So you're getting specific frequencies with that sunlight. But I like leaving my water out in the sunlight, when I'm sun gazing on the porch, I'll just put it on the railing, or for sunset at night. So you're getting the balance of UVA and UVB and all those things. Also getting the moonlight in your water is really great. Getting the starlight in your water is really great, or just getting something like the wand that can suffuse water with the full spectrum there is ideal. But another way that I really like to get a lot of solar energy in my water is by creating a Soleil solution, which is just a super saturated salt solution, like a super saturated saline. And I'll leave that out in the sunlight constantly. I'll leave it out there permanently. And then I'll just bring it in and put, a couple, maybe like a tablespoon of water for every quart, or rather a tablespoon of Soleil for every quart of water that I drink. And then you're getting those solar coats in the water without actually letting your water bake. Water is happiest at 4 degrees Celsius. It's kind of brilliant. Like, water holds its structure best and has the most stable, non-deviating structure at 4 degrees Celsius, which incidentally is the exact same temperature that most of the highest quality springs in the world come up at. If you measure a spring, a good spring, more likely than not, it's coming up at exactly 4 degrees Celsius. Water intelligently likes to keep herself there for the maintenance of her structure, but water maintains her temperature best at 98.2 to 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is exactly our body temperature.
Wow.
So our exact body temperature is how water intelligently knows to keep us at this. Because you could take water to any other temperature on the spectrum and she will deviate more easily. But if you take her to 98.2 to 98.4, she's gonna stay there for a lot longer. So she does so many miraculous things that baffle our understandings of physics in order to keep us alive and thriving and resilient. And no other substance in the universe acts with the level of intelligence that she does, except maybe hydrogen, which is why it's no surprise that 2/3 of water is hydrogen. I'll hop off my soapbox now, but I hope that answers the question.
Wow. Yeah,
Wow.
I can see
Yeah.
why you're so passionate
Yeah,
about this. I mean, wow.
Yeah,
It's fascinating. And we've only just scratched the surface. I mean, like I said, you can study water for an entire lifetime and still be learning new things every single day, which is why I've really devoted my life to teaching and just bringing this out to as many people as possible. Because once someone catches the water bug and starts to see through water eyes, like, I've seen it totally shift lives. I see it shift people's health all the time. And then the way that it makes people commune differently with nature, have a more somatic and intimate relationship with their own embodiment, their own incarnation, their relationship with divinity, their sense of reverence, their sense of activism, of guardianship, of protecting what is sacred, of taking care of their families in a different way, of safeguarding their longevity and their vitality in a more empowered way. I mean, water is the heart of everything. And so when we start connecting with water as the source of life, it really does change lives.
wow.
Well, I'm certainly going to change my relationship
Yeah.
with water.
Yeah, I have 6
I'm
steps
convinced.
I'm going to do right now.
Wow. Thank you
yeah.
so much for
thank you.
sharing all of that with us. I think our listeners, again, they are the more health conscious echelon, I'd say, but a lot of this is going to be new to many of them, I think. So we're going to take that and stick it in our hat and go with it for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to come on and chat with you and with them. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Isabel. And please tell listeners where they can find you and anything you're doing right now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so any of the tools that I mentioned, the water alchemy tools for how to bring water back into a state of vitality, from the top filters that I recommend to different types of water structurers that I've vetted. Again, there's a lot of swag on the market, but like the things that I actually recommend, the electrolytes, the water energizers, the light encoding water wand, the frequency encoding water pads, just anything and everything. can all be found at waterislife.shop. That's my curated directory of top water tools. And it also is broken down in terms of those steps. If you want to get, one item for each step to bring your water back to life, or there's one item that's my number one top recommended thing. It's the only thing on the market that actually filters, structures, balances, energizes, and suffuses the water with therapeutic doses of molecular hydrogen without using electrolysis. It's called the Spring Aqua Wet 7. It goes under your sink. It's an all-in-one solution. Top recommendation. That is also at waterislife.shop. All the goodies at waterislife.shop. And then if you want to learn more about water, if you want to study with me, if you want to dive into any aspect of the water wonders we've touched on here, waterislife.academy is where I have courses and webinars and workbooks. I have 12 28-day workbooks that will take you through just learning and implementing a little bit each and every day on every aspect of water. So, if you do all 12, you really have shifted your whole water paradigm. Or there's the internal oceans course that is all about your inner biowaters, how to optimize your intracellular fluid, your extracellular fluid, deuterium depletion, hydration in oncology, all of those things. There's the Spirit of Water course that's all of the esoteric teachings, the more mystical aspects of water. We draw on quantum water science and ancient indigenous water wisdom teachings and the holy water teachings of religions from all around the world. We go deep into light. We go deep into the ether, the quantum field, water in cosmology. That's probably my favorite course, honestly. And then, of course, there's Navigating the Waters that I mentioned before, which is just the basic primer for how to bring your water back to life. So those are the main ones. And that's all at waterislife.academy. I also host usually at least 2 water retreats per year. So if you want to come dive in person and just have this incredible, life-changing, transformative, somatic, like deep immersion into the beauty of water, we do one in Tulum every year where we go into the cenotes, which the Mayans considered to be the doorway into the underworld, or basically the subconscious of the earth itself. And they absolutely are doorways into mystical experiences. We do temazcals where we breathe in the sacred steam. We have Janzu underwater body work, which in my experience is the most profound body work. It really alleviates traumas in such an incredible way and just gets you into this beautiful state of trance that it heals the body. I've seen so many cool things happen, and it's like this rebirth experience too when you get out of the water. So anyway, there's a Tulum retreat. Go to the beach. It's beautiful. It's paradise. It's tropical. And then there's also the Bali retreat, which is we go to water temples. Bali is the land of Agama Tirtha, which is the holy water religion. So their water teachings are more intact than any other religion. I mean, they've been passing down holy water teachings for so many generations that the way that they create and transmit holy water in these temples are just like astounding, awe-inspiring. We get Melukat ritual baptism blessings. We get many of them, some from the high priestess of water, or said that the Balinese high priestess of Agama Tirtha. Anyway, they're all magical. So definitely stay tuned with the retreats. I always announce things first and foremost on my newsletter. You can go to waterislife.love for all of the free content like the blogs, the YouTube videos, a link to my Instagram. I'm too active on Instagram, but especially go to waterislife.love to sign up for the newsletter because I post things there that I don't post anywhere else, such as first access to the retreats, sales on and discounts on all of the water tools that I don't post anywhere else, and water activism opportunities and worldwide water prayer events and water workshops from other water wisdom carriers. And, if there's a chance for you to really get involved in water guardianship, I'll announce it there on the newsletter. So I would say the newsletter is it's not very consistent. I'm not going to spam your inbox. It's once a week when I'm really on my game, which is not that often. So like expect it a couple times a month. It's safe to sign up for it. I respect your inbox. Don't worry.
Wow.
That's great.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Isabel, for showering us with a flood of love. And we will definitely, share it many, many times. And, thank you, listeners, also for taking the time to learn about this subject, to not take it for granted, and to honor what was given to us and what is all around us. Well, thanks so much for listening. I sure learned a lot about water in this episode. I'm sure you did too. And if you want to learn more, you can check out Isabel's site. It's waterislife.love, where she has all of her events, consults, e-courses, blogs, videos, and her shop. And if you want to learn even more and take a deeper dive, you can check out her academy site, which is waterislife.academy. So thanks again for listening. Really appreciate your support. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, it's just $5 a month, and it really helps us keep the show going, and also gets you discounts on our courses and a one-on-one consult with us. And if you can't do that, we understand. All we ask is that you share this message with somebody that you love. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.